Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's ISC2 webinar. Today, we've got the good fortune of having Chris Beyer, who's the principal product marketer for Sumo Logic, with his colleague Chaz Clausen, who's a field CTO for security, also at Sumo Logic, today's event sponsor. And we're going to be talking about ensuring your SIEM is built for tomorrow's threats. And we're going to lead off probably with a little history of how we got here, where things are headed, and what to look out for. I do want to remind everybody over in the attachments and links section, we not only have a SIEM evaluation guide, an ROI report, but also a case study. I think you'll find those to be very interesting and very worthwhile. So grab a copy of those. And also feel free to pass along this URL to your friends and colleagues to join us as well in the future in the archive. Just a quick housekeeping video, and we'll be right back with these two handsome gentlemen.
This is Security Briefings, a deep dive into cutting-edge cybersecurity topics, bringing attendees a better understanding of issues and technologies. Some briefings are multi-part series, allowing a more in-depth examination.
CISOs are getting a seat at the table with the other C-level executives.
It's everyone's responsibility to protect information.
Here are a few housekeeping notes to keep in mind. Don't forget to leave your feedback and comments, as well as a rating in the Rate This tab. We take all feedback and comments seriously, and we want to hear from you. CPE credits will be submitted for ISC2 members within 5 to 10 business days. If the presentation is freezing, please refresh your browser. Now, get ready for a security briefing.
Gentlemen, we were talking before firing up the cameras here earlier about kind of the history, and I mentioned, perhaps gave away my age a little bit, of running a security shop and implementing an early first-generation SIEM. None of those companies that I had in my short list have actually survived to today, but a lot has changed. It used to just be a place to send all your logs so they were in one place and figure out which one wasn't set to NTP so you could go track the sensor down and fix it. We've come a long ways. And Chris, you were talking and giving some remarks kind of about the 5 phases. If you could walk us through kind of the geological phases of this market, that'd be great to set the stage.
Sure. It's about sort of the generational history of SIEM, as you said from the very beginning, just bringing all the data to one place. That's all anybody wanted. It was actually more driven by a compliance requirement to say, just bring it here. And then people started realizing, hey, there's some interesting data in here. This could help me not only do, investigation on what's breaking, but what else is happening in that environment. So we said, hey, second generation, we should do something with this data to make it easier to search. So let's go ahead and add some tags to this. Let's go ahead and mark it up a little bit. Let's give it some index so that we can search it. Fantastic. Next generation, we need more. I want more. I want real-time, analytics of what's happening in my environment. So we put that the Yuba, kind of behavioral analytics in there. Oh, dang it. I need more data to make Yuba work. Unfortunately, storing that data became very, very expensive. We had to find some other way to deal with this. So let's put everything in the cloud. That way we get that cloud native scale and cloud native speed. Fine, fantastic. We've now solved a data problem for Yuba, so all my behavioral analytics are starting to work. We're getting better information for investigations. I'm getting better information for threat detection. But now I have too much data. I'm now dropping things on the floor, not only for cost, but I just can't deal with it. We're in the newest situation now is, how do I deal with the exponential growth of logs data, and everything that a SIEM is traditionally asking us to deal with.
Brandon, we'll appreciate this too, because yeah, it was cool talking, swapping war stories back when you started in early 2000s, and none of those SIEM vendors exist. but I also started way back in like the early ArcSight days, which was one of the pioneer SIEM companies. But it was so funny when I first heard this. It resonated with me, and it'll probably resonate with you too. But somebody said, when I was shopping for a SIEM, I really wanted a single pane of glass, right? As Christopher described, single place to put all of my stuff. And what I was given was a single glass of pain. And it's like, oh, that hurts, because we were out there like proud of this solution that we had built, and then ultimately like the value prop quickly diminishes when it's too brittle, it's too hard to maintain, it kept falling over. Even when you could bring the data in, you had enough storage and network bandwidth to bring the data in, it would fall over the minute you wrote a poorly crafted rule or detection. And so yeah, it really was a a single glass of pain. It was like, okay, keep the beast running and don't touch it. And, nobody can log in except the security analysts. And, it was a nightmare. And fortunately, as with all technology, we are in a very different place now because um, we've really solved the collection problem. We've solved the scale problem and the brittleness problem of writing rules. Now it's like one of those be careful what you ask for. Now we are sitting at, on top of exabytes of data. And okay, the challenge that's currently facing us is, can you give me intelligent, actionable, insights from that data? And, it's impressive how far we've come in a short time, even with the advent of AI, which is going to be really interesting and industry shaping in the next, few months or quarters. But, the value prop is there. If you do not have a centralized correlation and security data lake, I think that you need to rethink that because, maybe you were burned in the past. Maybe you just lived through the nightmare of having a SIEM. Fortunately, we're not there anymore.
Well, I'm old enough to have done this a few times, and I am totally stealing that phrase, single pane of glass versus a single glass of pain. I'm probably going to go to my next conference with that on a t-shirt. But you bring up an important point, which was kind of the fragility of these early systems. And I mean, I remember having to steal a DBA from another department to come over and give me a hand with the database because it was not, performant. Where we are now, to Chris's point about moving everything to the cloud's great, but now we're kind of swimming in data. Before, when I first started, it was on firewall logs and IDS logs, and then it was maybe give me some antivirus, and then when we get to the UBA side, then it was kind of user login data. So I'm curious, Chaz, you're out there as a field CTO, which means you get to talk to a lot of people, and you probably funnel a lot of things back to Chris as well. So I'll get Chris's point of view. But with people that are still in maybe some long in the tooth technologies, and I talked to some financial institution folks a couple of weeks ago that have had the same SIEM technology for 10 years. They've just plodded along with it, and they've tuned and they've tweaked and they've grown with it. And now they're looking to change. What is it that is changing now or driving the change? What's the pain point that are causing people to reevaluate these platforms, especially when they've invested 10 years of effort into it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think to your point, it's time that we get better at reevaluating our security stack. Sometimes it's that what is it, sunk cost, right? I've written so many rules and so many searches and so many dashboards in my legacy tool that I really can't afford to move to something that's next gen. Or Christopher did a big study on like what generation SIEM we're currently at. So just put the number in there wherever you feel we are, Gen 5 SIEM. But the tools themselves are actually getting much more intelligent. And so I would say do your own due diligence. It's funny because you look at like a typical security stack, and it used to be there was a point solution for everything. And so you ended up with some very serious tool sprawl. And, some of them are very good and some of them are less effective, but regardless, like it ended up being its own problem. And I saw a figure once, if I remember correctly, it was like 70% of security decision makers believed that the increasing amount of management, like just the O&M of the security tools themselves, were inhibiting their ability to like effectively defend the business. And so now we're in a situation where you moved from having point solutions to, like what we said before, a bunch of pain. And so really do your homework. Ultimately, a thing like a SIEM should be, to use maybe an overplayed term, is it should be a force multiplier, because you've invested a lot of money in some very good tooling. Now, are you centrally aggregating that? Are you centrally correlating across that? And I think for a good reason, the entire industry has pushed back against that tool sprawl, and now we're moving more towards the opposite extreme, which is like platformization. Like, okay, I want a single vendor, a single throat to choke, and I'm going to be all in on Microsoft, or I'm going to be all in on Palo, or pick your flavor, right? And there might be good reasons for that too. I think that the answer is not on either extremes. It's got to be somewhere in the middle. And this can formally be done by looking to achieve what I call a minimal effective tool set, right? You want no more tools, but no fewer tools than you need to effectively do your job as a defender. And we at Sumo Logic, we come in, we are one of the last standing vendor agnostic like log analytics solutions out there, to be completely transparent. So this is a conversation that we get in all the time. Like, okay, you've got all of these tools on your endpoint and all of these tools on your network. You can smash all those together, or you can also have kind of like that central vendor agnostic view across the gamut. And then the advantage there, and this will come across a little bit sales pitchy, but I do fundamentally believe it allows you to be more agile, because maybe tomorrow you want a different EDR or XDR solution. Well, you can plug it in without ripping out your entire analytics platform. Maybe tomorrow you want to run a different network stack, right? So, it ultimately, I would say, do your due diligence, make sure that you demand that your vendors provide true business value assessments, and give them hard numbers, ask them challenging questions, make them prove their value is the best way to attack that.
What was that term? You said minimum effective what?
Minimum effective tool set, which is just, and maybe it was a Gartner, I don't know what some of these, but I really, when I heard it, I latched onto it because it's a way to just conceptualize. You don't want too many tools, but you don't want too few tools. And so somewhere in the middle is that sweet spot where you've dialed it in, right? And a lot of that is consulting with your, the guys in the trenches. Hey, what
Sure.
tools work and what tools don't work? Don't let all the decisions come from the executive, but don't let them all come from the bottom up either, because they'll bring you a new tool every day, depending on what they were tinkering on in the basement.
Yeah, no,
So,
I saw, it's just the term reminded me of Timothy Ferriss in his book 4 Hour Body refers to minimum
oh,
effective dosage. So the minimum amount
nice.
of a supplement, or the minimum amount of exercise to achieve the maximum result. And that kind of resonated with me. But to your point, I saw a report a week or two ago that said the average shop has 43 different security tools. And I can see why there's this drive towards platformization, which is a word I have trouble saying, and therefore I hate it. But it says I get the one throat to choke, but when you look under the hood, half of them are built from acquisition and aren't really stitched together that well anyway. And you made the point about it being a data and analytics platform. And years ago, I wrote a piece on kind of the business model of the security operations. And it was, what is our goal is to not necessarily defend the enterprise, but to have the insight to make the decisions about risk. And it rested on data and analytics. And I've seen, for 20 plus years, the SIEM and log environment has been the cornerstone, the backbone of which most of the security program is built off of. So, Chris, I'll take the question over to you now with that teeing it up is, what is it you're hearing from the customer base about why they're switching, or what their view perhaps is switching before even a vendor change or an architecture change occurs?
So I'm gonna give you a couple different numbers here. One, I'm going to see your 43 security tools in the average shop, and I'm going to raise you to 76 security tools in large enterprise.
Oof.
So it just more and more and more, so after 30 years, and talking to people being in security myself, I see really two stubborn kind of gaps, and it's context and tempo, right? Many SOCs are still juggling with their cloud logs, their endpoint logs, their SaaS events, and they're running different tool sets for all these things. In fact, I've even seen some shops now talking to CISOs who are running two SIEMs, one for cloud, kind of pieces, and one for everything else.
Yep.
I'm like, why are you doing that? Because by the time you piece together whatever the breach story was, is that hours? Is it days? Is it months before you get to a root cause analysis here? You're just too late by the time you figure out what happened or what's happening within your environment. So how do we go about solving some of these problems? We're talking a little bit about that already. It's about how do we get all the data into one place? How do we create that high volume logs with a shared data plane? How do we enrich every event with the appropriate context, whether it's coming from threat intelligence or user context? That enrichment, feeds this near real-time analytics and delivers for you a playbook that you can say, yep, AI may have said that's the playbook to run, but I, as a human, in making those decisions, right? So you can get to those root cause analysis, you can get to the investigation, you can get to all those places. So the real question in dealing with context and tempo, how fast you have to do this, is do you buy best of breed across the board to Chaz's point, because you might want to swap something out in your tech stack later, or do you buy a portfolio and hope everything works for you?
And if you buy a portfolio too, if I've got 75 tools but 25 people on my team, everyone's got to be an expert in 5 in case I lose one person, so I have backup. And you can't be an expert in that many things. It's hard enough to be an expert across the Microsoft Office suite, let alone a security stack. But you mentioned context and tempo, and I want to drill into those 2 points, because context was always one of the things that we've been, I think, struggling with, because we're not data and analytics professionals by trade. We're security people. And we see, you mentioned the enrichment with threat intelligence or correlation of events. Those were kind of the early phases. I actually kind of refereed a steel cage match between a CIO and a CISO once, where the CISO was saying, I need my own data store. I need my SIEM, all my log data. This is critical. And the CIO is like, yes, but there's other data that I want, including that for things about performance and fault management and app data and such. And I just turned to the CIO and I was like, do you have a data and analytics practice on your team? He goes, yeah. And I was like, great. I turned to the CISO. I'm like, you're his customer. Figure it out. He's now your supplier. You can decide on architecture. Find one place to put your stuff and stick whatever analytics straw you want into that lake to drink from it. And that was a few years ago. And what's funny is I'm hearing people get so frustrated now. People are even talking about building their own. And I'm like, are you nuts? I don't know, Chaz, are you hearing, especially in larger enterprises, they seem to think that I've got the cloud so I can pour everything into a data lake and build my own analytics on top. But that just seems like a fool's errand.
Yeah, I mean, the goal is noble, right? Because we have this whole discipline of observability over here that has very rich telemetry and, metrics, events, logs, tracing. And then you've got the security team over here, which has a very different set of requirements, often overlapping data. So in some ways, it does make sense to, unify all of this data. The challenge is, how do you do it, right? And that is not an easy thing to do. A lot of people are looking to, these clouds, data lakes, to answer that problem. But then you're almost like winding the clock back and undoing all of the learnings that we've done. Like we started this conversation out, like, okay, is it brittle? Can it handle your real-time detection rules? Is there data normalization so I can write a rule in the first place, or is it all unstructured data? And I think we're going to land somewhere. We'll see. One of the Sumo logics, our hypothesis is you can actually have a tool that bridges both observability and security and solves them efficiently. If you go attack this problem at the outset with that in mind. It's not common, to be honest. Like, the people writing the security checks are very different than those writing the observability or site reliability, or whatever checks. And so ultimately we're still in this unfortunate situation where we have tools built for different teams, and ultimately it eats into your business cost, because even though there's 70% overlap in the data, you're storing it in multiple different places when you could in fact unify a lot of that. Now, just sometimes a point solution is needed, right? Because you get something that's very, very good at one thing, and other times it's not. So I'm not going to oversell that idea, but I think when you start to wrap metrics around what you're trying to achieve, make sure you do a use case driven approach, you might find that you can actually be very effective, with some central analytics tools that are happening, in the market.
Two points on that. One, everybody's storing data somewhere, in different places, but much of it could be normalized, right? It's time series data with an event ID, an event type, an asset or whatever. It seems to me like we could unify this, but I want to come back around a little bit to kind of where the value in this is, because Chris mentioned the context, and we've seen a lot of those point solution, Chaz, that you talk about end up becoming features and seem like they should have been built in from the beginning.
Right.
So I look at SOAR. What is it? A lot of people are like, well, I can automate my triage, but they start with automating enriching the data. 20 plus years ago, there was a SIEM called NewSecure that no longer exists, but they had what they called their host investigation toolkit. I see an alert, I right click on it, and I say fetch, and it goes out and it gets me the FQDN, the IP address, and all this other stuff on it. We're back to that. So is the automation side part of the context, or is it part of the tempo that Chris was talking about? And Chaz, I'll start with you, but Chris, I know you're going to have an opinion on this.
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. And, maybe I'm oversharing here, but we had to make a very hard business decision at Sumo Logic, because a few years ago we acquired a SOAR solution out of Italy by the name of DF Labs, and we have that today, and you can still buy it as a standalone SOAR solution. But we decided, after listening to our customers, and you articulated it very well, as they did to us, do you really need to have automation a separate solution, or should it be part of the entire data pipeline, investigation and response? So as a company, we just decided to give it away for free. We refactored it, and we took all of the playbooks and the automation services, and we just pushed it into the Cloud SIEM, and it's something that you don't pay for today. Now the feedback we're getting is great, because now every alert gets automatically enriched. You can do, automatic notifications. You can do remediation and response, and the time saving is now passed back to the customers. We're not, we lost that line item in our, our catalog. But at the end of the day, if we can level up customers, I think that's really what we need to do. And the last thing I would say there is, you should be, a mature security operations program should have metrics that they're tracking to see if we're getting better over time, or if we're not. So MTDD, like the mean time to detection, mean time to response, which is the automation side of the house. So the detection would be, are your rules working? The response side is like, how long did it take an analyst to own that alert and actually do something about it? Make sure that your tool has in product metrics that you can then look at and see, okay, are we on a continuous improvement path of getting better or worse? Is analyst Bob or Mary doing a good job or a bad job? And find those weaknesses and fill those gaps. Create some KPIs for your team around them, like, okay, this is what I would expect to see moving forward, and then next month we're going to review it and see if we achieve those goals. So hopefully that helps. Christopher, I'll let you throw your opinion in the mix and either agree or disagree.
I'll just add, Chris, before you come in, and you talk about the use cases and the enrichment. I remember one of the first problems I couldn't get the vendors to solve was, I've got a Windows exploit. It's targeting a Linux box. Don't even show that to my analyst, right?
Right.
And now we have SOAR, which is supposed to automate a lot of that enrichment and squelch those types of things. And the question is the analyst response what I really need to be metricing, or is it the platform? Because now I'm having to go to yet another tool like a Jira ticket queue or ServiceNow or something like that. But I liked what you said about use cases and metrics. And Chris, I'll let you jump in here.
Sure, absolutely. So just taking that first kind of scenario there, I would think nowadays, if we have an attack that's coming in as a Windows attack against a Linux box, I should be dealing with that from a context level. That's a correlation rule issue, where I can tag all the rules, everything that's coming in. I'm already parsing and normalizing the logs. I know the vendors that are associated with each one of these events. I can now tag all of that with a MITRE TTP to say where things go, and yes, and have a squelch for alerts that should not be firing, even though I'm seeing attack type activity. But if it's not going to be associated with a real time or a real impact, as the case may be. That's like the old antivirus on the Mac. I know there's no viruses for Macs, but
Right.
but we have rules, and now that we can set around this, and part of that rule process is bringing in that enriched data and into the environment, whether it's virus total things, whether it's any number of threat intelligence lists that you can get from. The bigger issue now is not whether these things should be enriched, but how is that enrichment creating the insight? How am I giving enough information to that first level technician so that they can make third level decisions?
One
As
thing
the
that,
case may be.
yeah, I
Because
think it's interesting to maybe get for the practitioners that are listening, they'll appreciate this. But like if we take just one feature and functionality, which is the context problem, a lot of traditional rules were written as static match rules. Like if you see this, then trip an alert. Well, then you're in this constant game of whack-a-mole. Like, well, he's a developer, he does that. Oh, that's my vulnerability scanner, it does that. And the list is endless, and you're in this like never-ending rule tuning madness, right? Now, most of the detections that are good are doing baselining, right? They're intelligently monitoring from that entity level, like a very entity centric approach. So we took like what was learned from the world of UEBA. Again, this is another example where, hey, take that technology, push it down into the SIM so that your rules become very good. But now all of a sudden that the rules become much more efficient, and then you take that a step back and you have different rules, different tripwires that are all correlated back to the same entity. So when you open a quote unquote insight, it should tell you from beginning to end, here are 5 things that this entity did. It could be a user, an IP address, a host name, and we think it's suspicious because of these, this cluster of telemetry that we have. The analyst now is automatically a tier 2 analyst because they don't create context. They're not writing searches. They're not a ninja at query languages. They're opening the insight and they see the attack timeline or the kill chain presented to them at stage 1, right? The thing that we just recently added to our insight algorithm is AI-driven insight summarization, which is huge because I used to be an analyst on the front lines too. But now with this cluster of signals now, you get in human natural language a paragraph that the AI agent dissected all of the underlying signals and raw messages and logs and said, it looks like this account was compromised, and here are the reasons why. We saw multiple logins from different geolocations. We saw, an abnormal use of this particular credential to do things it didn't do before. And it's just written as if you were talking to your colleague and he's explaining to you the situation. Before you even look at the alert, you get this LLM generated signals, insight summarization. And who knows where LLM, how far this is going to push into red teaming, blue teaming, purple teaming, etc. But I think that, to your point, that problem that we've always had of, hey, where's my context? Like, what does this alert mean? I don't know in isolation. Let the tools be more intelligent, demand that they're more intelligent, so that as an analyst, you can spend less time investigating and more time responding.
No, I like it coming across as natural language. Instead of reading a bunch of log data and figuring out in my head, I'm reading a short paragraph of a crime novel, right?
Right.
So here, let me ask you though, because we do get a lot of people, it's ISC2 after all, that are entry-level folks or wanting to become entry-level folks. You're talking about entry-level folks being level 3 people because of this additional context. It seems to me that this could be a really valuable learning tool to elevate these people, because I hear all this talk about we're going to modernize and automate the level 1 away, and I'm always like, well, how are you going to get a level 2 person if they've never been a level 1? I don't know, Chris, what are your thoughts on that? And Chaz, I want to hear yours afterwards as well. Kind of the labor implications, because this is really about doing more with less and doing it more accurately.
There's the fun myth out there that the AI is going to replace everybody. We're not gonna, all these jobs are gonna go away. And at Sumo, I stopped saying artificial intelligence, because this myth is just not real yet, if it ever becomes real. So the words I use are augmented intelligence. So, people, process, and technology, we're improving the technologies with things like AI generated insight summaries in order to deliver more to the security team, in order to help that first level technician, learn. Hey, if I've never seen this alert before, how do I go about describing it? How do I describe it to my boss? As the case may be.
We could translate it into PowerPoint so the CISO could just take it to the board. That would be even easier. So
we got you, Brandon. We have this already. If you think about the sort of the processes here, inside the Sumo platform, we also have a Copilot type capability as well. So that technician can take that summary and start asking Copilot questions in real natural language. And then the answers to those questions, the things that they get from the databases and all the log files and everything, can also be represented graphically. So
even better.
Eli, and the cool thing about that, Brandon, one thing that's worth pointing out on that Copilot feature is when you ask it a natural language question, it'll show you the results, but what it also shows you is the query. And so to your point, an analyst, let's say you have a new hire, tier 1, who's just learning the Sumo query language or language X, you, over time, you become a power user just by interacting with it. Like, hey, can you show me all the failed logins on a map? I have no idea how to write that query, but I asked the Copilot, and the Copilot says, oh, sure, here's the query. Guess what? Now I see the query and I learn how it works, and I can modify it, and I can eventually become a jujitsu expert at query writing. And so we're definitely not looking to eliminate positions from the security team, but really elevate them. So it's a very, very big difference there.
Seems to me like with this kind of capability and the learning that's baked in, I should be able to hire more junior people and pay less than senior people, because I can elevate them. I can, Chris, to your point, I can augment them. I can pull your sim on and make them a cyborg.
I still have working years left.
Bring in the interns and let them take Chris's job.
Well, let's carry forward with kind of this platform conversation, though. I appreciate what you're doing, and I think it's good for both the enterprise and the labor pool. But again, I want to come back to kind of the problem. If people are switching away, and I've done SIM swaps. It's a colossal pain, right? You got to normalize your data, you got to transfer, you got to do all the ETL to get it into the new platform. You may have a separate, entirely different query structure, query language. What's driving this? Where are we not getting the value, and where should buyers, no matter where they are in that stack that we talked about, you don't want all just engineers, you don't want just management, but what should buyers be looking for in the value story that they're not getting today and they should be getting? And I'll let either one of you dive on that grenade, because that's a big one.
Yeah, let me start with that one, because I haven't published it yet, but I just recently did a study of over 500 CISOs and security professionals asking these types of questions, and there was a 70+% question out there of, hey, are you looking to change your SIM? And 76, I believe, between 73 and 76 said, yes, we're looking to change our SIM. So I have to ask the follow-up question, why? Why are you looking to change your SIM? And the answers go into two different directions. One is to continue dealing with the digital transformation that we've been on for years now, as more people are pushing to cloud native services. The other is to deal with the second problem that we haven't talked a lot about, is tempo, speed.
Right.
The issues with bad guys getting faster, stronger, maybe lower bar to entry, because they're deploying AI and similar technologies against us, as the case may be. So what I'm seeing is a lot of folks are looking at, how do I deal with the skills gap issue that we just kind of talked about from a labor perspective? How do I get more out of my teams and make them better, and using technology to do that? But the reason I'm doing that is because the world is moving so much faster.
Sure. And largely, the world moves faster because of some automation. Yes. Your thoughts, Chaz?
I think he successfully handled that grenade, so I don't really have a lot to add. I will say, when you're looking at a solution, try to future-proof it as much as possible, and that that's never completely possible. But I'll give you just a few examples. Speaking as like an architect, can it leverage open source technologies like collection, for example? OTel, or open telemetry, for those that aren't familiar, has just came raging into the scene now, where you can deploy a vendor agnostic agent that handles metrics, events, logs, tracing, and it has hooks into every SDK, and it's on Windows and it's Mac and Linux, etc. Wouldn't it be nice if the vendors supported an open source agent like that? And so that even if, like you said, you have to rip out your SIM, heaven forbid that happens, but if you do, you don't have to redeploy this massive amount of work that you've done on the collection side. So, and of course I will put in a plug, Sumo Logic is all in on open telemetry. We're one of the top contributors to that open source project. But that's a simple example of, like, how do you future proof it so that ultimately you can do that. Another example would be, make sure that it handles on-prem, cloud, multi-cloud, hybrid, all of the above, so that you don't end up back in the same situation where you just move to this next gen SIM. Well, it was really great at collecting this SaaS cloudy stuff, and now all of my on-prem stuff I've got blind spots, and now I've got to bring in another tool to plug the gap that I didn't have before. So just do your due diligence, make sure the tools you have kind of are moving you in the right direction. That's the only thing I would add to that.
So what would we want to look for? Maybe I'm coming into a mid-sized enterprise that has done this at the point level, right? I've got my EDR, MDR solution logging. I might have some firewalls logging. Things are logging to the respective places. Great. Because everything's its own little ecosystem. I want to come in and I want to drop in a centralized solution, right? I want to solve this truly as a data and analytics problem, but I may not be a data scientist. I may not have the luxury of having a bunch of big brain PhDs on staff. How would I go about, in a boxes and arrows away, architecting what this should look like so that I can communicate this to senior leadership, key stakeholders? And I think that's the middle ground, right? Because I remember having long knockdown, drag out fights about putting an agent on a box or forwarding logs from a server, right? Because everybody had their little fiefdom. How do I structure this in a way to show, here's what we're going to do to centralize this, the benefit we're going to get, and why I need you on board?
You want to take that, Chris, or do you want me to take
Why,
it?
why don't you?
Chris probably has something he hasn't published yet, but I'm sure it'll be out soon.
I would say, like, although it's an expensive exercise, but getting a couple of vendors that claim they can solve that problem, centralized analytics for observability, security, different use cases, cloud, hybrid, prem, multi-cloud, all of that, I would say make a short list and actually kick the tires, right? A typical POV shouldn't last more than 3 or 4 weeks. And that's real data, that's your use cases. And at the end of the day, you see the output. And if you see too much noise, or you see, a headache, I didn't get all the data in until week 3, that should be a red flag. Problem is, of course, everybody's got their day job. And so, having them put on pause, okay, we're going to do this bake off between a couple solutions that claim to be 5th generation, this or that. It is an expensive thing to do. At the end of the day, though, I think it does pay off. So I don't know if that answers your question directly, but it's more like cut through the noise and the marketing and everything, and just say, hey, we're going to actually put your money where your mouth, or whatever the phrase is, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's see it in action.
It's simple as like forking the data off of a span port and sending it to both solutions and seeing which one doesn't fire. Go ahead, Chris.
So I actually want to give you one step better. So right in the materials that we're providing for this presentation and training is a SIEM evaluation guide, which gives you a 5-step kind of process and scorecard that you can actually use to help in your evaluation. Starting first with, how do they collect the data? Are you going to be able to get all of your data in? And interestingly enough, there's a financial side of that. Can you get all of your data in a reasonable, budget? How do they transform the data? Do they have a rich open schema with over 300 fields they're going to be able to map all of the logs that you're bringing to the party, regardless of whether they're well understood or not, or whether they're structured or not? Will you be able to add that structure so you can write rules against it? How do you do the analytics? Do they do a lot of the analytics for you? Do they have an easy to use querying language? Do they have a co-pilot? You don't even have to learn the querying language. You can use natural language queries, but actually have it give you the suggestions that drive the conversation or drive the investigation that you're going through. Finally, how are you dealing with that investigation? And getting to root cause? Can you do it quickly? As we talked about before, how are you measuring that MTTD or MTTR kind of capability? And last but not least, I think one of the areas that you can really hone in on is, how does the system allow you to collaborate with everybody else in your enterprise? Are you getting the dashboards that you need that you can actually share with your boss? Are you getting the dashboards that you need that you can share with IT or dev from a DevSecOps kind of perspective? We talked a little bit about that. How are we seeing this as a single source of truth and being able to share that data across the process? All of that is detailed in the document for evaluating your SIEM. And again, I can certainly throw Sumo up there in each one of those stages and say where we're going to deliver the most value for as far as I believe for our customers. But you'll see immediately, who's good at collection versus who's good at analytics versus who's good in investigation, and you start putting your own weighting, put your own numbers in, and you'll see which systems are going to meet your needs.
And I think it's also imperative to come at this with predefined use cases, like what Chaz was talking about, some of the examples you gave about your DevOps team. But what I took away from that, Chris, was you don't need a data and analytics person. You need to partner with the right company that provides the solution. You need to understand how they handle ingestion, normalization, enrichment, insight, delivery, and that is where you get that force multiplier for data and analytics. And I've got a friend of mine I've known for years who, instead of hiring a couple of junior analysts, is hiring a couple of junior programmers, because everything's an API these days, and he wants to consume more data. And he found that a general purpose Python programmer is a lot cheaper than a security, SOC analyst.
Interesting.
And yeah, I think that points to they have more than 43 tools. I don't know if they have 76, but that's part of his problem. It's like my grandmother would cut out these little squares of fabric for days and then meet up with all of her friends at church, and they would stitch them together in a quilting bee. That's what he's doing. Everything's a point solution, and he's got to spend a whole Sunday sitting down with his friends, eating butter cookies and sipping tea and stitching it together into a solution. That's not a good use of a security operations team's time, in my opinion. So I think, Chris, you hit on something here where a lot of the value comes in to let the special purpose people, partners, and tools do that heavy lifting. And that's where you're going to get the value, instead of burning your own cycles to reinvent the wheel. Did I overstate that?
No, I completely agree. When the little squares come in, I want the answers almost there on Tuesday and not Sunday. And let's allow your security team, who has the wisdom to really know if you're under attack, given the information that's being delivered to them, and then how to go about responding to that attack, even if it's running a pre-built playbook. Yep, we've seen this. Run this. Do this containment. Shut off that IP. Do this other process over here to get rid of the vulnerability. Whatever that process is, having the experts be the experts at what they do, and allowing your security teams, again, the augmented intelligence that they need in order to make those decisions faster.
Well, we've got time for a couple more questions, and I think between the three of us, we're either missing enough hair or what we have left is gray enough that we can bring some experience. And one of the things I like to leave people with is, what not to do. What are some of the ways that people mess this up going in? Like maybe the top thing that you see that either didn't work in a previous implementation, or even with your own solution, when they approach the problem domain incorrectly. Chaz, I'll start with you, and then Chris, give me your thoughts, and do save us time for at least one more round on questions, because I got another one on the way out the door.
Yeah, I mean, I will answer this as a security practitioner first. And just remember that security is a supportive function of doing business. It is not a revenue generating part of the business, right? And sometimes, a bad CISO is labeled as a CIS no, because every time the business wants to innovate, he's going to come over the top and say no, right? Is that effective security? No, it is not, because there's always risk. There is never going to be zero risk. And so your goal is really to minimize that risk as efficiently as possible, as cost effectively as possible. So just keep that in mind. We get wrapped up in our world of security very quickly, and it's okay, we need to spend $1 million here and you can't do any of this, and ultimately we're left with a business that can't operate. So that's the first thing I would say. I'll put a plug in for a book that I love. It's called Security First Principles. Everybody that's in this space should read it. Written by a former CISO of Palo Alto, but he really brings that back to distilling what security is down to a first principle, and then slowly branch that out, right, into all of the functions that you're doing, zero trust, threat hunting, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's a good, just keeps us level-headed about what we're actually trying to achieve. But yeah, that's just, I know it's very high level, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, no, deconstructionist all the way, but I like it. Chris?
So what I would say here is make sure you're tracking. Chaz says this a little bit earlier, and we sort of just touched on a couple of points in terms of understanding what your security analyst productivity is. Track some hard numbers, right? Whether it's mean time to detect or respond or investigations per analyst or whatever it is. If those curves aren't bending, if you're not affecting those things, then you're funding a log archive and not a security capability. So this is how you're going to ensure that you're getting the value out of the SIEM tool that you're using.
No, valid point. Back in a previous life, I worked for an organization where they had this phrase: "What are the dogs not barking?" What is the question that's not being asked? What is the problem that's not being taken care of? What's kind of the elephant in the room, or the thing that senior leadership should be asking of the team that's evaluating these types of solutions? What is going unasked and therefore unanswered? And Chris, I'll let you go with that one first.
Sure. I think one of the bigger problems that we've seen over the history of SIEM is what data am I not getting? Where's my blind spot? And I have to ensure people today, there's economic models for this, but bring everything to the table. Ask if you're not. The question you should be asking is what am I not bringing to the SIEM in terms of a data source, as opposed to what should I leave on the ground because we can't afford it.
One of the things that we did at Sumo to answer that challenge was $0 ingest. Oftentimes you had a lot of data that you just couldn't afford to bring into the SIEM. And so I think it's a disruptive approach to pricing these solutions out. But what if you had a bucket where you could essentially bring the data in at no cost, eliminate all of those blind spots, still have it performant, searchable, scalable, et cetera. But you're only paying when you're actually doing your analytics. And we still, we'll always have the unlimited all you can eat analytics tier of data, but giving that option is huge. Now I can bring in my DNS logs, which I never could, or my sysmon, or my firewall denies, like all of this data that I was like, too expensive, sorry, you can't have it. Now it's got a home, right? The other thing too, Christopher's great point about metrics. It's not MTDD and MTDR are great. Operationalizing MITRE ATT&CK is huge, because that's probably, it's not perfect, but it's one of the best ways to determine your your attack server, your posture, your security posture. One of the cool things that I love about Sumo is we will provide a MITRE ATT&CK heat map, every tactic and technique in a grid, color coded by coverage, not for Sumo, but for all of the tools that are feeding into Sumo. So you've invested a lot of money in this EDR
repeat
tool.
that again. You're gonna hold on, back up, because I'm not sure I caught exactly what the implication of that is.
Yeah, so the MITRE ATT&CK heat map, basically you open up a grid and you've got all the different tactics and techniques, how the adversaries are getting in. Well, in theory, if you truly have a single analytic solution that's ingesting all of this feed, you should be able to correlate that. Hey, this solution gives me coverage on these different tactics and techniques. And so we actually have an out-of-the-box dashboard. You open it up, filterable by vendor. Like you click your EDR, you click your WAF, you click your firewall, and it lights up. Okay, now I see what my coverage is based on the tools that I actually have, or based on the rules that are in my detection coverage. And it gives you a score, like you're 39% coverage according to the MITRE heat map with your current security stack. That's just
so it's like going through my fridge wanting to make a meal,
yeah.
and it comes back and tells me what I'm missing, automatically adds it to my phone so I can go to the grocery store and buy that gap.
Exactly. And then
That's pretty interesting.
maybe you justify it like, hey, I need to do a quick run to the grocery store because we're missing, Worcestershire sauce, or you need to buy another tool because we really don't have coverage in this area, or maybe the efficacy is not good, right? Or whatever. But that kind of metric beyond just MTTD is like, hey, now at least we're trying our best to give you kind of a holistic view of what is your 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 security posture, if you will.
So if you're going to go to the grocery store, you should probably know what items there might be a run on, because especially when that tornado is coming at you, maybe we should be going to buy some water or something like that.
Nope, it's always bread and toilet paper.
Bread and toilet paper. But here's an interesting view. There's one more view that Chaz hasn't talked about in terms of our implementation of MITRE. Is not only am I going to tell you what you got covered, but I'm going to tell you what the neighborhood has covered. And what all other anonymized Sumo users and what kind of rules they're running and what kind of coverage they have, so you can compare your posture against your peers. So you can say, hey,
it's some automated benchmarking.
Yeah, so I've opened up the refrigerator to everybody in the neighborhood, and I know there's only a limited amount of bologna left at the grocery store.
I better get there soon.
Get there quickly.
Well, do people still buy bologna?
I feel like we've covered 25 years of InfoSec history and data and analytics here, but it's been a pleasure having you both on. I have to release you back into the wild, unfortunately, to go check your bologna supplies. But thank you for the time, and thank you for the lighthearted but very informative conversation, as well as the assets over in our attachments and links section. And speaking of those assets, we've also included our LinkedIn profile so you can understand a little bit about the history that we've been talking about and where we've come from. Maybe even take a look at charting your own career choices, or maybe choosing not to take the same career choices that we've made. But it's always great to hear from the context of our panelists. Also, we take, please, a moment and just fill out your comments, not just a star rating, but let us know what you thought of the programming. A bit of a deep dive here, both historically, but also contextually. So give us your thoughts. We continue to shape this programming to meet your continuing education needs and the needs of your organizations. Also, I'd be remiss if I did not say, register now, save a few bucks, whether you're going to be in Nashville live with me or virtual. Please take a moment, get registered now before that price goes up. It's a great opportunity to meet your friends, colleagues, and fellow practitioners and learn from them as well. Also, if you are interested in volunteering, ISC2 is looking for help on commenting up the unified body of knowledge. You can head over to isc2.org/volunteer. It's a great way to get connected with others across the community on a global scale, bringing your knowledge and insights to the table for the next generation of practitioners. With that, everybody, thank you so much for your time and attention. It's been a true pleasure, and I look forward to continuing the conversation soon, everybody.